challenges of service delivery in the country from time has always been an issue. Well, perhaps we'll talk on that a little more. We're joined now by Dr. Austin Tam George, who is a former lecturer in University of Cape Town, South Africa, and now the Executive Director of the Institute of Communication and Corporate Studies in Lagos. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Well, as a matter of fact, tomorrow we understand that the President will be signing this performance agreement contract with members of his cabinet. I mean, we even asked Professor Moyo, what's with that? And he says it's with international best practices. And so some even ask, do you actually need that for ministers to perform? Because we thought that if you're coming on board, they already know your capabilities and strategies, your strengths and weaknesses before they bring you in.
Yeah, service delivery in Nigeria is a problem, and if you think about it, it's something of an oxymoron, because it's a contradiction, because given the kind of resource profile that we have, it's surprising that we have one of the worst infrastructure in the world and even in Africa. So I think that there are a host of reasons that are responsible for the lack of service delivery that we experience in the country. And one of the reasons, I think, has to do with the character of our politics. Now, why that is so is because if we emphasize, regionalism in the choice of the people who lead us, it means that the real reason for governance itself is abdicated, is submerged. The real reason why people go into office is to deliver service to the people. But if we dissipate a lot of energy and worrying a lot about where the leaders come from, what kind of zonal or political, geopolitical balancing that we need to do, the real reason why people get into office itself seems to be lost. So I think that when in the last analysis people are elected into office, they do not seem to elect people who have the capacity to deliver service. And so once they are elected, they seem to wonder what to do. And so this is basically the kind of problems we've had. And it didn't start with Jonathan's administration. Actually, it's been on since 1960, which was why as soon as we gained independence in 1960, rather than emphasize, how the country would move forward, we were more interested in, creating tensions among regional leaders. And so as soon as a person comes into office, the tendency is for us to relapse, go back and say, well, we've put somebody in office who's from our zone. Nobody seems to talk about how to deliver actual service to the people. And so we don't have a tradition of service delivery to the people.
With what you said, is it right to say that you're saying that politics is a major problem?
Oh yes, because it is through a political process that you choose leaders, and these are the leaders who ought to be held responsible for service delivery. But the people themselves ought to be elected on the basis of their competence, their ability to deliver service. And when those people are not elected on that basis, and they are elected mainly on the primordial considerations of where they come from, service delivery will go to the back burner even when they are eventually elected. So it's a combination of politics and actual capacity to deliver service. And so if we tend to over-valorize the zone where a person comes from before we even think about actual service delivery, the tendency is that we might end up electing people who have no capability at all in even delivering service in the first place.
Let's look at this scenario. I like to link it with what you do. You teach, and definitely will come a time when you want to examine those people and see if truly they've been doing what you've actually put before them. Once we had the minister here, National Planning Minister Shamsuddin Usman, and he told us about how well they will be evaluating some of these ministries, departments and agencies quarterly, even though till this moment we haven't seen anything. And to go by what Chamberlain asked earlier on, that is given, we shouldn't be talking about someone bringing some kind of report card or being washed over, knowing full well that this is expected of you. But now we are here, we understand that we must watch those people just the way you want to watch your babies. What should we be asking at every point in time, and what kind of services should we focus on so that we know what to ask of the government?
I think the president is right in setting up a performance contract with those cabinet ministers he appointed. I think it's an evaluative system in order to know how each ministry is doing, in terms of delivering service. But I think that we know better than to leave politicians to assess themselves. The people themselves, civil society, the people who are the ultimate receivers of this service, are the best judges as to whether service is actually being delivered or not, or whether service that is delivered to the people is of the quality that they deserve. So I think that this is not a matter we should leave for the president and his cabinet. Every Nigerian has a responsibility, I think.
I like that word, quality.
Yes.
Let's space it more on that.
Yes, there is service delivery and there is quality service delivery. And I think that the people who are the ultimate beneficiaries of the service are the best judges as to whether quality service has been delivered or whether quality service has been delivered at all. So this is going to be a symbiotic process. The government monitoring its own personnel in terms of actually delivering service, and the people ultimately wanting to know whether the service has actually been delivered. Because sometimes you find that contract may have been signed, but the actual specifications of the contract are not implemented, or where they are implemented, they do not meet the kind of international standards that Professor Moye was talking about. So I think it's going to be a symbiotic analytical process. The government will monitor its own personnel in making sure that service is delivered, and then the people themselves must be the ultimate judges of whether service is delivered at all.
Give us a comparative analysis on this matter, if you will, because in the 60s when we had regions,
yes,
there was a lot of development. I mean, people talk about education, the economy was booming, there was even healthy competition. Some of these universities that we have today, which is at this moment, came at that time. But it looks as though there's a decline, because provision of basic amenities, which was being talked about at that time, it was even being talked about today.
Yes, it goes back to the kind of political practice that we have. You see, the kind of politics we have does not even allow very competent professional people, to advance themselves for public office. The kind of politics we have, appears to be in favor of mediocrity in the first place. So even if these people are elected and they get into office, they seem constrained. They don't even draw from the large pool of professionals and experts scattered all around the country. They seem to take from a very small pool within the party. So you find that there is no technical competence even in the way contracts are allocated. Before you allocate a contract, you need, for instance, to conduct a technical audit of the competence of the person who is going to execute the contract. But what we have, as I said, because of the character of our politics, is that politicians basically give road contracts to lawyers, aviation overhaul contracts to traditional rulers. So what kind of quality service delivery can you expect from such a system? So I think that we need to first of all get the quality of our politics right, so that it will resonate in the kind of selection of personnel that we make in implementing these policies.
In all of this, delivery makes a lot of sense when you put it in line with time. When you're talking about good delivery, it's almost directly proportional to time. Shouldn't we be talking about timing in all of this?
Well, at the level of implementation, whenever resources are allocated to certain projects, they must, as Professor Moye, your earlier guest said, must be in the budget. And my suggestion, I think, when I was last here on the program, was that if the implementation of the budget is a problem, in the year it ought to be implemented, then it makes sense for you to start all the preparations for the budget the preceding year, so that if a budget is going to be implemented, say in 2013, everything about the budget, from preparation to submission to the National Assembly, up to the ratification and the debates around the budget, and the due procedures, all of these procedures need to be observed in the preceding year, so that at the crack of the new year, actual implementation, whether of ongoing projects or of new projects, begin. So if you don't do this, okay, and you submit the budget in 2013 and all of these processes are then followed, it means that in the second quarter of 2013, less than 10% of the budget would have been implemented. I think this is a systemic problem we need to overcome. It's not so much a matter of personnel as much as understanding that democracy is not simply about voting people into positions, but it's also about processes, and we need to master these processes. You know, understanding that budget preparation and implementation should, you know, be typologized in such a way that the budget preparation comes in the preceding year, so that it goes through all the normal statutory processes, and then the actual implementation begins at the crack of the new year. This allows you full 24 months or 12 months to implement the budget.